Well, good evening, everyone. I'm going to give it just a moment to let our participants arrive. It looks like everyone's just coming into the event here, so we'll give it just one more minute and then I'll get started. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining. I'm going to give it just another 30 seconds and we'll get going. I'll make sure our number of attendees is kind of topped off here. Well, great. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to our third National Academy of Construction Ask Me Anything for the spring 2021 semester. My name's Keith Molenaar and I'm an NAC member and a professor at the University of Colorado Boulder. The National Academy of Construction was established to recognize our industry leaders, and an important purpose of the Academy is to provide a network system of linkage between past and present participants of the construction industry, and that's you. Thanks for joining us today. As such, we've established this NAC AMA to help transfer knowledge to our next generation of construction leaders. So the format for our AMA is really simple. Our speakers here are going to make a short presentation about a topic. In this case, we're going to talk about joint venture estimating and give you a little bit of their perspective on the industry. If you've not already, it's important, please email your questions to nacama@colorado.edu. Again, just all one string of letters, nacama@colorado.edu. We'll be reading your questions, and at the end of the presentation here, we'll draw one name for a $500 scholarship, and we'll announce that at the end of the event. So I'm really thrilled to be talking here tonight with Chris Traylor, and he's co-president of Traylor Bros Incorporated. They're a family-owned corporation founded in 1946. He's got a bachelor's of science in civil engineering from Stanford University and a master's in civil engineering from the University of California, Berkeley. This company performs an array of services, including tunnels and other underground structures, bridges and highways, locks and dams, ports and wharfs, industrial, power, and equipment support. He's a member of the Construction Industry Roundtable, the Beavers, the American Society of Civil Engineers, and he's received the 2016 ASCE Outstanding Projects and Leaders Award, the OPLA Award, a very prestigious award from ASCE in 2016. He also serves as has served as the president of the Moles. And Chris, maybe you can tell us a little bit about what the Beavers and the Moles are as we go through here. Chris is a member of the board of the Construction Industry Ethics and Compliance Initiative and the Construction Industry Safety Initiative, CISI. Traylor Bros is proud to be a founding member of the Construction Industry Safety Initiative, a forum created by industry leaders to improve safety culture and best practices through collaboration with partners and clients. In addition, Chris has served since 2015 on the University of Evansville Board of Trustees. So Chris, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it. I know you're gonna give a short presentation and introduce some of your colleagues, and then we'll jump into the questions. So the floor is yours here.
I shared my screen. Can we all see that gantry with the joint venture estimating title? Great. Well, before we get going here, I would like to introduce the co-authors of my paper who are work colleagues of mine. Mike Roach and Dan Collins both have over 40 years of experience, each of them, working in the heavy civil construction industry. Mike has worked most of his career with Traylor Bros in the underground construction space and currently serves as the chief estimator for our underground division. Dan Collins also has many, many years of experience, primarily in marine and heavy civil construction. He currently serves as both the chief estimator and the Western region manager for our National Heavy Civil Group, which focuses on marine structures and complex bridges. So they're both here with me, help write this paper, and will be available to answer questions because they deal with many of these JV estimating issues on a much more day-to-day basis than I do. So with that, we will go to my first slide, which is why do we joint venture in the first place? I listened to Bob Perito's talk to you all last month, and I thought it was a perfect lead into this discussion. Bob talked about systemic risk and large complex projects. Joint venturing is a key way, in our view, to mitigate some of the largest risks in large complex projects in the heavy civil construction space. And the reason that you joint venture to mitigate those risks is for the reasons I show you here on this slide. First, and what we'll talk more about in this presentation, is it gives you an opportunity to get another look at an estimate for the project outside of your own organization. We rely on our own production history and our own innovative approaches to the project, but to bring in another partner who has their own views on how a project should be built and what their cost history is, ensures that you get the price right on the front end. And of course, when you're bidding, a $500 million, $1 billion, or $1 billion infrastructure project, getting the price right can be very important when they are lump sum, and you'll be stuck with that price for the next 5 years. Another reason we joint venture is to share resources. These large projects require hundreds of salaried staff to manage, and 300, 400, 500 hourly staff at times to go build it. So it also takes massive amounts of equipment. And so the idea of sharing resources, both personnel and equipment, to build these jobs will mitigate risk. Of course, financial risk is a big deal on these jobs. And that's another reason why you would joint venture, is so that, if you do have a bad outcome, that the negative consequences of a bad project aren't all on your shoulders, but they're shared with a partner. And that's very important as well. And then lastly, a reason to joint venture is to find someone who might have complementary skills to you. At times, on these large projects, you might have 80% of the skills needed, but not the other 20. And to find a partner who can fill the void of those skills that you don't have can mitigate risk. It also is oftentimes important for us to bring in a partner who has reinforcing skills for all the reasons I discussed previously. So that's why we joint venture, is to mitigate risk and improve the likelihood of a positive outcome. So getting to the specifics of this paper, there's really 6 key points we hit on for the JV estimating process. The first, of course, is to pick the right partner. And I've already given you some reasons of why you might pick a partner. You want someone who's strong financially, someone who might be able to fill in some gaps that you might have in capacity, and someone who can bring a full estimate to the table to make sure that you get the price right on the front end. Once you have selected this partner, one of the 2 partners will be selected as the lead or sponsor of a joint venture. That leader will set ground rules for how you'll estimate the job as a joint venture. These rules revolve around how you'll group your costs, what labor rates to use, what equipment rates to use, and some material and subcontracting plugs that you'll eventually get hard pricing on, but on the front end, you agree on some plug pricing so that you're having apples to apples comparison. After you've done that, each partner does estimate the job. And when you get to the point of reviewing your estimate, of course, the key is to compare differences. And so, you're going to focus on differences in project approach and means and methods. You might focus on differences in work schedules, and of course, differences in production rates that you may have used for pouring concrete, setting rebar, setting steel beams, etc., or mining tunnel. When you're comparing costs, one key thing we like to emphasize is it's okay to disagree, and you may not agree on every last detail at a lower level. You scour your estimate and go through the detailed lower level costs, but and each company takes note of the other partner's production or their approach, and they may or may not adjust their price in each area. But the key is that after you've heard how your partner is approaching the job and what their experience is, that you agree at the end of the day on what a total price for the project is. And so sometimes people get bogged down trying to agree on every last detail. And our experience is that as long as you've gone through those details and shared your experiences with one another, the important part is that you agree on an overall price for the project. After that's done, of course, it's critical for the principals of each organization to agree on what we think is an appropriate fee or margin for the project. Of course, higher risk projects require higher fees. We also discuss contingencies as well. And those might include areas where we're not sure our estimate is correct. It may be related to a very aggressive schedule that the client has set, and we might be concerned that we might go over, and we might want to add some contingencies for that. It could also be for maybe we're working in an area with very difficult labor and we're not confident in our productions, and we might add contingency for that. But I will say that when you select a partner, it's always a good idea at a high level to talk about fee expectations, because you don't want to get to the end of the day, have compared prices, and have one partner have a fee expectation of half the other. And then lastly, it's important that you JV for the right reasons. It is illegal to joint venture with another company to reduce competition. So the reasons that you JV are for everything I've already discussed previously: to reduce risk, to share resources, to make sure your price is right. You can't joint venture to reduce competition, and that's very important. So with that, I just wanted to introduce, our thoughts on this paper, and we'd welcome questions.
Great. Well, thank you, Chris. Yeah, we have some great questions here. A lot of folks have read the paper, so some of them are detailed and some are a little bit more general, just on the industry at large and where students are going. So I'm going to go ahead and just start with some of the questions on joint venture estimating. So Ronald asks, what's the biggest challenge when working with others on a joint venture estimate?
Well, I'll take that at first, and then if Mike and Dan want to chime in. But in my view, oftentimes when we've partnered with people who don't joint venture very often, they typically have a desire to want to agree on a price for every single bid item, which can be very painful, because it's almost like if you have 100 bid items and you have to agree on a specific price to each bid item, that can be a very difficult and time-consuming process. Our typical joint venture bid reviews on, let's say, a $300 million job typically take 3 days. The first day, the estimators come in ahead of the principals and kind of clean the estimate up in the zero read, which you probably read about in the paper. The second day, the principals arrive and you do a first read where you go through these details. So on this job, we give ourselves a full day to do that. If you try to agree on every little price on every specific part of a job, it could take you 2-3 days to do that. And so one frustrating part could be, spending too much time on the details. Are important, and it's important that they're shared, but they don't all have to be agreed to, because different approaches and different productions are okay. What's important is you agree at the end of the day on an overall price. Mike, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, you want to roll back 2 slides? There you go. So in addition to what Chris said, one more forward.
Or the other one?
Go one forward. You went too far. There you go. So in addition to what Chris said, if you see that big blue ball there that says the rules, a lot of times that's where we see problems with folks who don't joint venture very often, or haven't joint ventured with us in a while, or sometimes even frequent partners do this. If we're the sponsoring partner, we'll have a pretty specific rule book that everybody's meant to follow. And where you really start to fall off the rails is when people stop following the rule book, or don't even read the rule book, right? It just makes the rest of the whole comparison process that much more difficult and time consuming.
Thanks, Chris and Mike. Appreciate that. Chris, Lewis does ask specifically about the zero read estimate comparison and just what you were talking about. His question is, how do you identify those items that you want to compare? Like you say, you can't compare them all. Did you have an approach to identifying which ones really need comparison?
Well, I think what we have a part of our rules are that we have a way we break out cost groups, and then those cost groups are broken out by labor, materials, subcontracts, and equipment. And so what in the zero read, our chief estimators go through them with their counterparts and try to identify areas where there are large dollar differences. And particularly with materials and subcontractors, you can quickly identify if you've already done a quantity comparison and your quantities are the same, which they should be, then you can quickly identify why is the subcontract, price $1 million different than our partner, or why is this material amount different? You can also often see it in labor rates, because we not only do we check labor in total dollars, but we put in man hours and dollars per man hour. And if the dollars per man hour are significantly different, it might be an indication that they're using different labor rates than we are. And so in the zero read, the goal without the principals present is to go through and change plug prices that weren't followed, or to, maybe a quantity wasn't reconciled and you get a quantity correct. Or to make sure that they followed our labor rate library that we sent them. That's the intention of a zero read. And those are some of the problems we identify in it.
Great.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think that answers for sure. Let me have a follow-up on this, and maybe Mike or Dan want to jump in. Adriana's asking other things that you've done to ensure the accuracy of your work. So what are just some standard practices that you do in cost estimating to ensure the accuracy of your work?
Go for it, Dan.
I can offer a recommendation in addition to a very complete and rigorous set of joint venture estimating instructions. That's assumed. We always do that. In addition to that, and things like what we've just described, the zero read, we found that a best practice for us in teams, usually there's two teams, our team and the partners team, working for a period of 1 to 2 months in a very concentrated way in first takeoffs and then pricing of the estimate. There's a lot of work going on by a lot of people in a short amount of time. We found that the best practice to keep everyone aligned and headed down the same path correctly to culminate at the joint venture comparison is that weekly call. So if possible, all the estimators join. If not all the estimators, at least the lead estimator responsible for each partner, have a call. It's usually 30 minutes to an hour once a week just to talk through all these things, because questions always come up. And if you keep that regular communication going, it usually ends in a very good result.
Great. Excellent advice. Anything else you'd add there, Mike or Chris?
No, I think he's got it. And in this past year, everybody's been kind of working virtually anyhow, even from their own office. Everybody's learned to use these tools. So that makes having these weekly meetings even a lot easier, because everybody's used to popping in front of the screen for half hour for all these meetings. As Dan said, it's fairly helpful. It just brings everybody along, helps you explain the rule book again, if anybody's got any questions. But yeah, you need to keep everybody aligned, and the zero read is also very important. If you have these weekly meetings, everybody's following the rule book, and you have quantity comparison at a time and a good zero read, you ought to be pretty aligned.
Great. Well, thanks.
I will say that Well, I'll just pass. We'll just keep going. Go ahead and ask the next question.
Hey, Chris, if you wouldn't mind, maybe you could unshare the screen so we can, folks can see us better. So thank you. Appreciate that. Couple more questions around estimating, and then there's some general questions on joint ventures overall. But one is it for you all, you do different types of projects. How does, and Sandra's asking this, how does joint venture estimating vary by the different types of projects?
Well, why don't, Mike Roach spends most of his time estimating underground projects and Dan doing marine construction projects. So I'll let them answer that.
Well, I think in general, it's the same thing, whether it's a tunnel, a subway tunnel, or a bridge, the process is the same, right? It's just different types of heavy civil construction. And I know it's the same, at least under our roof, because we do internal joint ventures with Dan's group all the time. And there's not any learning curve for his estimators to work with our estimators and vice versa. So, a couple things we do a little bit differently, but it's not dramatically different that we're tripping anybody up in the process. But in general, at a medium level, even the process is exactly the same. You have to get down into the weeds before you see that we're estimating something that's underground and he's estimating something up with the sun shines.
There is one difference. It's kind of a minor point, more of an esoteric thing, but typically the underground division handles their equipment on more of a equipment ownership cost on a more global basis in its own category within the estimate. They handle equipment operating costs per hour throughout their direct cost items, but the equipment ownership is looked at by itself all in one place in an estimate. Our division, and it's very common in non-underground heavy civil work, is for both equipment ownership cost and equipment operating expense to be built into the various hourly rates. So we will estimate our equipment with built-in ownership cost in the hourly rate, and then look at it or analyze it on a total basis at the end, whereas the underground group separates out the ownership cost into its own category. It's kind of a finer point, but it is a difference.
And
We'll get you there, Dan.
we have a couple kind of student-specific estimating questions I'll hit you with before we go to the general joint venture. One, Colby asks, is it good to start on small projects estimating? You all work on very large projects, but Colby's just in school and asking about small project estimating and what can be learned. And then also, Chandana is asking about relevant softwares to be learning. Do you think that's a skill they should be building, or are they kind of transferable? So,
Can you please clarify the first question about small projects?
Yeah, I think just for a student, is it helpful to learn estimating through working on small, estimating small projects?
My answer would be, sure, it is. I think one thing that's nice about estimating a smaller project is that you can get involved in all aspects of the estimate, from, the direct cost to the indirect costs, and pulling it all together. On the large estimates that we're doing, Mike and Dan Collins are breaking those estimates up into sometimes 5 or 6 different people working on the different pieces of the estimate. Someone's doing foundations, another person's working on substructure, concrete. Someone might work on, steel erection and superstructure. Another person might work on the indirects. Someone's working on subcontractor and supplier solicitation to make sure we have all that covered. It's a major effort over multiple months, and it can't be done by one person. So the advantage of working on small jobs is that you get to kind of do all that yourself, right? And get exposure to all pieces of it. And, I think, I've had the experience of bidding smaller bridges, with just maybe a little help from other people. And I'm sure that Mike and Dan have had similar experiences in their careers as well. And I would say there's definitely benefits from that. So yeah, I wouldn't say you have to have done big jobs. The next thing I'll say, and this may be a later question, is to be a good estimator, in our view, you have to have experienced the work yourself. To just constantly rely on other people's cost history and other people's ideas about how a project should be built can be challenging. It doesn't mean you can't do it, but I think the most effective estimators are those who have experienced the work in the field and then can bring their experiences to the estimate. And then what was the second part of the question?
It was about software. Do you think learning a specific software is important, or would you say it's more transferable?
In the heavy civil space, the most common software is HCSS, heavy bid. And you'll see in other spaces of the industry, other software are different. But I would say if you're going to work in the heavy civil space, HCSS is by far the most common. And I think we listed N8 is the other one. Is that the one we listed as the second one in our paper? And that you see that. I think Kiewit actually owns N8 now. And so you do see that a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
They bought hard dollars.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, they did. Okay.
They've incorporated into N8 as well. So,
okay.
And then do you still build, specific spreadsheets or, one-off approaches to some aspects of the estimates?
I would say that I will just say we generally frown upon estimates done on spreadsheets. It's just kind of ripe for error because, whoever built that spreadsheet, is the only person who can really be trusted with the formulas that are used to develop it. But I mean, sure, it's one major part of an estimate that we use a spreadsheet for is the equipment reconciliation. So at the end of whether we're doing it the way that was described in the underground group or the civil group, at the end of the day, we have to, look at all the equipment that's in our bid, and then we have to time span the job and make sure that the outside rental rates or the internal rental rates that we're using, that the money in the bid's enough to time span the job. So we use spreadsheets to basically check our estimate, where we time span our equipment. We have a separate one that we use to time span our staff to make sure that our estimates are correct as well. So I would just say that they're done to check our estimates, not to create the estimates. Would you guys add anything to that, Mike or Dan?
I think that's right, but I'm not sure what the question may have gone past estimating software. Like, of course, everybody uses Excel, and everybody nowadays is coming out of college pretty good users of Bluebeam as well, and use that a lot for takeoff, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of a handy tool to have for takeoff stuff. But as Chris was saying, we use heavy bid, and a lot of our partners and competitors do too. But you don't need to run out and spend a bunch of money on a license for heavy bid if they don't have it at your school. You can pick up on it pretty easy. It's not a very difficult bit of software to pick up on. So you don't need to spend nights and weekends trying to figure that out.
For us, Excel is a tool to be used with heavy bid, but it doesn't replace heavy bid as the core piece of software that creates our estimates.
Outstanding. Yeah, thank you, Dan. All right, one more question on estimating before I go to joint ventures. I like this one. Josh was asking, what's one mistake you've made as an estimator, and what were the consequences? I think this is a good question. If you don't mind answering it, estimates are an important part of the business. So would you mind sharing any responses to that question?
Mike or Dan, you deal with this every day, or a mistake one of your estimators has made. Do you guys have any thoughts there?
Well, going back to, what Chris said about, and what Dan also said about, Excel being a tool, but not a replacement for heavy bid. We in the underground division, we go cradle to grave with an estimate in heavy bid. because of past errors that were made in Excel spreadsheets. And it cost us things like, a piece of equipment that we need on a job that ended up we didn't have any budget for because it fell through the cracks in Excel spreadsheet or an error in Excel spreadsheet, or some other costs like that we didn't have. We've had on closeout comparison sheets where folks had mistakes in their Excel spreadsheet, and you leave 500,000 pounds of rebar off the job. That stings a little bit too. So I think over the years, we've learned, we've evolved, and so we've got all of that actually inside heavy bid now, so that we're minimizing those errors.
Great.
I would agree. Over my career, probably the most common and sometimes the biggest errors or busts occur in the closeout where you're comparing quotes received either for materials or from subcontractors to what you've assumed or plugged in your estimate. That can get quite complex, and you can make math errors, spreadsheet errors. You can have just a sheer logic bust where you overlooked something or did it incorrectly. That's probably the category over my time that's been the most common.
This is more judgmental than technical, but I've been involved in estimates where maybe we didn't get good coverage on a specific item that maybe we thought was trivial. I can remember we had some landscaping on a bridge project that we did win, and we had thousands of dollars and a plug for it, and it ultimately cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the judgment error was not getting good coverage on in quotes on those subs. Another judgment error that I've seen happen is when you maybe price a piece of work that is not your core capability, and maybe you get a subcontractor price that varies wildly from that. Sometimes your nature is to stick with your estimate because you think it's correct, but if the subcontractor who is a professional at that core area is much higher, you might want to think real hard about sticking to your guns on a price that's not your core capability. And that's happened to us, particularly around bridge demo. We've gotten too cheap with that a few times, and we should have probably gone in with our subcontractor pricing.
Great. Yeah, thank you for sharing those experiences. I think it's good for our participants to learn from those. So thanks for your willingness to share. Let me switch to a number of questions around joint ventures. One is from Tolupe. In a joint venture partnership, prior to commencing the estimate, is there a formal agreement on dispute resolution? So are you already getting into those terms when you start the estimating, or do those come later?
So I'll take that. There is a dispute resolution clause in our joint venture agreements. In my history, we've never used it, and we joint venture almost every project we do. The joint venture agreement usually is not signed until really closer to the bid day. Usually, at times we have a teaming agreement that we sign on more complex projects that might involve multiple partners and designers, consultants and the like. We might have third-party costs that we have to share, and that's why we sign a teaming agreement or an MOU. And again, those do have dispute clauses in them. We've never used them. They usually involve some form of steps where whoever's the lead partner can move forward with whatever they think is appropriate, but then there's mediation of sorts. It usually escalates to the top level of each organization to see if you can work it out. If the top presidents of each company can't work it out, it would go to mediation and then maybe arbitration. Again, we've never had that happen because fortunately we've been able to pick the right partners on the front end. And I would say that specific to estimating, the resolution to a really strong dispute is to just not bid the job. So in the estimating process, any partner has the right to pull out before a bid is turned in. And so if there is truly a dispute during the bidding phase, the easy resolution is to just separate and not bid.
Great. Thank you. Let me see, just along those lines, a couple folks have asked how you choose your partners in a joint venture. Sorry, I lost the question here for a moment. It was from Amit. Just what are characteristics, or how do you choose your partners, especially with a national firm like yourself? You might be going into locations where you haven't worked before. What are those characteristics, or how do you choose a joint venture partner?
Yeah, it depends on the project, but you just hit a key one. So, we're a national firm, but we don't have a significant presence in New York City, for example. There's large underground projects and bridge projects coming up in the area. So, when we see a project in the New York City or New Jersey area that we want to bid, we know that we're not going to go there without a contractor who is strong locally with labor. And of course, we would be bringing technical expertise, maybe in complex bridge building or, soft ground tunneling that our partner might need. So, we're going to be bidding several jobs in the area with Skanska in the coming next couple of years. And we're, I think, aligned with them on 3 or 4 different projects. And Skanska brings a strong management and labor force with strong supervision in the area that really understands that labor market and the clients in that market as well. And so we would not go there without a partner like that. So that's one way we select partners. Of course, we're also looking for someone who's strong financially and can bear the risk of a potential negative outcome. We're looking for someone who has a similar culture to us. Every company is a little different, and some companies are, much larger than us and maybe have a bit more of a command and control environment and are very process oriented. Our company, while we're big, we're not as big as some of the really, really big guys. And so we tend to have a bit more of a decentralized management culture where we give a lot of authority to the project manager and the project team. And so you can imagine if you have, a very decentralized command and control culture combined with one like ours, that might not work very well. So we often look, we're a family-owned business, and sometimes we look to partner with other firms that are like us. Massman Construction is a similar size firm out of Kansas City that, I know the president of well. J.F. Shea is a family-owned tunneler out of Southern California that my brother Mike knows the president of very well, and those relationships can really make a difference. So, those are some of the reasons and how we pick a partner: that similar culture, strong finances, competencies in a region maybe that we need, and many others.
Great. Yeah, excellent. Thank you. I appreciate the comments, and I hope everybody was listening, just, how relationship based it is and how much you really need to know your partners.
Yeah, I will say that our joint venture partners, the list of people we really want to work with is maybe I could list them on less than 2 hands. So sometimes when we get really picky, it might be 1, but they're the partners who collaborate well with us. It's in our field, it's pretty limited.
Good. Well, Grace asked a question. She looks like she enjoyed the reading on complementary versus reinforcing alliances, but specifically, she had a couple questions around the ability to partner. So, are 2 companies allowed to partner whenever they want? And can an owner deny the use of a joint venture if they want it?
So most of our large complex projects have a pre-qualification. And so usually, maybe 7 or 8 teams will submit a pre-qualification, and usually 3 or 4 will be pre-qualified. Not always, but that's more typical. Sometimes clients will pre-qualify more than that. And, if they do, it will think twice about bidding the job. But clients do have a say in who gets to bid and what teams get to bid. And I would say they use the pre-qualification process to do that. I think the answer is part of the question. Can you remind me what the other part was?
Yeah, just are you allowed to joint venture whenever you would like, I guess is.
I would say the answer is yes. You know, obviously we want our qualifications to meet the client's requirements. And so one reason we would joint venture is because maybe we don't meet all the qualifications ourselves, and maybe the partner will bring some qualifications that we do not have. But um, there might be a rare occasion where a client does specifically want a single contractor. Usually on smaller projects, we would not consider joint venturing. You know, for us, that would be 100 million or less. And so it is possible that a client would prefer to not have a joint venture, particularly on a smaller project. But for us, it's usually our choice.
And you did mention in the introduction too, that you can't use a joint venture to limit competition as well. Would you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you, I mean, you need to have good reasons to joint venture, and I gave you all the reasons that we have, but I'll just give you a good example of a project where ultimately it did lead to one bidder, but for good reasons. We bid when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. They did all kinds of work, you know, billions of dollars of work around New Orleans, and we were involved in many of the projects. One of them was a large flood wall across the east side of New Orleans. That is where actually Hurricane Katrina came in. It was called the Ihnc flood wall, and we built that project. It was a $500 million job that had to be built in 18 months, and for anyone who does what we do, it takes massive resources. So we created a joint venture with Weeks Marine, Massman Construction, and Traylor to build that, which are probably the three largest marine contractors in the area, because it required those resources to go do it. We could not have ever gotten that job done without all three companies coming together to build it. Us individually would have no prayer of pulling that job off. Well, in the end of the day, there was one other team that bid half the job because they didn't have the resources to do it either. And so the indirect effect was there was less competition, but it was because the owner required so many resources, in such a fast schedule, that we had to come together as an industry to build it. So you can't do it. You can't joint venture as a core reason to limit competition. If it's an indirect side effect, that's fine, but it can't be your reason for doing it.
It's a great example. Yeah, it's exciting, the projects when they get to that scale and have that kind of impact on society as well. So it's wonderful you were able to do that. Omar asks, this is the last question on joint ventures, and then we're going to be running out of time here shortly. I want to get into some of the career questions, but Omar asked, what's a common problem that could cause a joint venture to fail?
Well, that's a good question. I would say over-eagerness could happen at times, where if you have two partners who are maybe low on work and really just fall in love with a project, you have a joint venture where every single productivity is the best productivity they've ever gotten, and you can just get too cheap. That's one obvious reason, that a joint venture could fail. Dan and Mike, do you have any comments on this one?
Well, I've never had a
Partners can fail for other reasons not related to the actual project that you're coming together on. And if they have a financial failure, that impacts the joint venture just through their own financial issues.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I've never had a joint venture fail or fall apart during the bidding process.
That's good. That's good news. It's probably back to Chris's points of picking the right partners and some of those characteristics. So thanks for the question, Omar. We appreciate it. Yeah, we're only have about 5 minutes left here. So I wanted to get into a couple questions, one from Hallie and one from Kayla. Hallie asks, and I think this is great for all three of you, what classes or experiences during your college career best prepared you for your professional work? Chris, do you want to start and hand it off?
Sure. I went to Stanford University, which was a great, it's a great school, but I would tell you that I don't feel like I got some of the technical education that you may get at UC Boulder or at, Purdue University here in my home state. So I think getting a good combination of, liberal arts courses that help you with reading and writing is very important combination with the technical courses you get. I came out of my undergraduate degree with strong liberal arts skills and a good foundation of civil engineering. I actually went to graduate school to strengthen that because I felt like I needed that and it benefited me greatly. But I would just say that, engineers obviously are very technical people. Don't forget that, when you go into your career, that you're going to have to write letters to your owners. You're going to have to work with people who think differently than you and manage them. And many of those skills aren't taught in engineering school. And so don't be afraid to push yourself to learn about, how to write, learn about other cultures and how they work. Because the combination of those two things is what will bring you into leadership in our industry.
Outstanding. I'd just like to reinforce that, Chris. As a Dean of Engineering, I'm wholeheartedly support students going outside the college to our across campus and really take those history, communication, sociology courses. All of those really give you a better opportunity for leadership in the long run. So yeah.
Right, and oftentimes, the rigorous curriculum of an engineer limits that, but I still think there's ways to do it. I studied abroad and during my 4-year degree, and it was a huge benefit for me as well. Mike, Dan, do you have any thoughts on classes that made a big difference?
Well, I'll just reinforce what you said about the writing and all that. There aren't many engineers who are good writers. And they figure out, like Chris was saying, you got to write letters, you got to write proposals, you got to write rebuttals to, claims sometimes, and things like that. And you need to be able to write and get your message across in a proper way. And just, you need to be able to write a decent letter because, that is an expression of yourself and your intelligence when you send that out to a client or to a JV partner or something like that. So that's very important to be able to do that. Of course, being a well-rounded individual so that you can deal with all the well-rounded people there are in the world as you go through life working with them, for them, or they work for you. Again, as Chris said, is very important. The world's made up of all kinds of different people, and you have to know how to deal with all kinds of different people. Now, from an academic standpoint, I went to Michigan. Tip-offs at 7 o'clock Pacific time. And I primarily took technical classes. I knew walking in the door there that I wanted to go into underground construction. That was going to be my career. But back then, there was no place to learn that. There's a few places now, School of Mines, and a couple other places that are teaching courses in that. So I chose to get my emphasis was in structural engineering. So I could get the strongest technical background I could out of my time and my money in college, knowing that the fine points of my industry, I was going to have to learn after between summer jobs and what I would learn once I got out in the field.
Thanks, Mike. Dan, anything you'd like to add?
Well, my response would be similar to Mike's. I spent most of my career on the structures side of the business, some non-structures, but mostly structures, always in heavy civil construction for 40 years now. And I think the core structures related engineering classes that I took back in my undergrad days are the ones that benefited me the most over the years, just having that core structures engineering classwork background.
Right, you're referring to steel design and concrete design, technical, that's the stuff that sticks with you. And I wholeheartedly agree. Those those courses benefit me, benefit us all to this day.
Well, Chris is probably going to have to be the last question here just due to time. But Kayla was just asking about graduate education. She's considering Berkeley, but maybe you could just more broadly answer. Do you think graduate education is important, or just lifelong learning in general as part of your your career progression?
I think it depends on the person. For me, I had a couple of reasons I went to grad school. One is that I took before I really got going on my career, I took some time to have some fun and got a job at a ski resort in Colorado between undergrad and grad school. So some of you at UC Boulder will appreciate that. I lived in Vail, Colorado for a year. And before I dove in head first into my career, I wanted to take some time off. So for me, going to grad school gave me an opportunity in between undergrad and grad to do that. And then, I mentioned earlier that I think that going from Stanford to Berkeley for my graduate degree helped kind of reinforce some of the technical areas that I didn't have. For example, I took a wood design class at Berkeley they didn't even offer that at Stanford. And man, that was an amazing class, and I learned a lot in it. I also took some construction management classes that weren't in my course because I took civil engineering more on the structural side. And so I was able to get construction management classes in my graduate program as well that benefited me. So, that was great for me. I think others maybe come out of college and are ready to dive in head first. You can do fine without a graduate degree. And I think, but I would encourage anyone to pursue lifelong learning. We have a program at our company at Traylor Bros where if people want to get a graduate degree, we'll give them time and help pay for that education as they advance through their career. We had a person just get an MBA who did that while working for us. And we've had other people do, advanced degrees in construction management as well. So there's no one size fits all there. But I think, Keith, you hit it, that you never want to stop learning. And so even once you start your career, to find ways to advance yourself through technical industry education, to going back and getting an advanced degree. Some might do it by taking time back away from your career later. Some people might do it while they're working. And most good companies will find a way to work with people who want to do that.
Well, thank you. That's a wonderful answer. Well, that really is kind of wrapping us up here. I want to announce who our scholarship winner is, but first, Dan, Mike, I really appreciate your time and also the time you took to author the paper as well. It's wonderful that you're giving back to the industry that way. Chris, wanted to give you just a minute to close out with any thoughts before I announce the winner.
Well, I mean, we talked a little bit about careers in our industry. I was talking to Keith about this earlier, but I guess I would just say that make sure you pick a career path that you're passionate about and that you love, and not because someone told you to do it or because there was more money in it. I think, pick a company that aligns with your values and that has a strategy and a fit for you. You'll find that, you're going to get job offers that might have, $1,000 or $2,000 in difference. I can assure you, while that might matter, and I don't want to, underplay it to you today, that a decade from now, if you've picked the right company with the right job and the right culture, that $1,000 isn't going to matter. So, my advice to any of you is just, make sure you're doing something that you love, and first and foremost, try to pick a company to work for that does what you like and that has a culture that seems like a fit for you.
Thank you, Chris. Great advice. I really appreciate you sharing that. Well, that brings us to a close. I wanted to thank the National Academy of Construction, Wayne Crew, Sandy Pittman, and also Jane Manalo here for helping put this on. And I also wanted to thank all of the members who contribute their their resources and their finances so that we can give scholarships. So I wanted to announce the winner, and that's Adriana Diaz from Bradley University in Peoria, Illinois. So Adriana, congratulations. Really happy for you. We'll be in contact via email to get that scholarship to you from NAC. Everybody else, we'll look forward to our last NAC AMA of the spring next month on cost estimating. And then in the fall, hopefully you'll join us again. We're going to have a series on large and complex projects. So really looking forward to a lot ahead. And thank you for joining us. Thanks again, Mike, Dan, and Chris. We really appreciate it. Have a good night. And go Michigan.